Bitstream is still stable. So, okay. Alrighty. Well then, I think what I'm going to go ahead and do in this case, I think I'm going to go ahead and crack open a Fairy Tales. Which brings me to the next question. I wonder if I should go for the Japanese fairy tales, Anderson's, or Grimm's. Or there's also just like another one like general fairy tales that everybody should have heard. But that's Western fairy tales. I don't think I haven't heard any fairy tales in a while. And you know, Grimm's is actually done pretty frequently. So, you know, I think I'm gonna probably go with Anderson's. Mr. Anderson. But yeah. Japanese fairy tales people have definitely probably not heard as much. I mean, unless I don't know if you guys, you know, for those of you who actually watch, anime and stuff, the Yamashibi series, those are actually Japanese folk tales, but they're mostly like scary ghost stories. But a lot of them are based on fairy tales. There was also another series that had, you know, that did like a lot of like the classic Japanese folk tales, which was also pretty interesting. I don't remember the name. I just kind of remember Mukashi Mukashi, you know, long ago. But all right, you know, let's go ahead and break out Anderson's fairy tales then for this one. So, and now for something completely different. So, sorry, I'm like looking through like the book selection here, like Declaration of Independence, Through the Looking Glass, Robinson Crusoe, Uncle Tom's Kid. What the Anyway, no, that's a different stream or a different platform. All right, I'm opening up Anderson's. Give me a sec. There we go. While that's opening, let me go ahead and update the title and stuff as well. All right. Unfortunately, I don't have a generic book asset to use at the moment. My book asset is actually a specific book, so I don't want to break that out. Anyway, okay. So we've got a good connection. I'm going to go ahead and just drop right into this. So again, welcome to Story Night. We're going to be reading from Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tales. So feel free to go ahead and kick back, relax, you know, feel free to snooze or doze if you like, and just relax and enjoy the vibe. Now that we can finally get started. Again, I apologize for the delay. So, give me a sec, let me hydrate, and then I will get right started. The Emperor's New Clothes. Many years ago, there was an emperor who was so excessively fond of new clothes that he spent all his money in dress. He did not trouble himself in the least about his soldiers, nor did he care to go either to the theater or to the chase, except for the opportunities then afforded him for displaying his new clothes. He had a different suit for each hour of the day, and, as of any other king or emperor, one is accustomed to say, he is sitting in council. It was always said of him, the emperor is sitting in his wardrobe. Time passed merrily in the large town which was his capital. Strangers arrived every day at the court. One day, two rogues, calling themselves weavers, made their appearance. They gave out that they knew how to weave stuffs of the most beautiful colors and elaborate patterns, the clothes manufactured from which should have the most wonderful property of remaining invisible to everyone who was unfit for the office he held, or who was extraordinarily simple in character. "These must indeed be splendid clothes," thought the emperor. "Had I such a suit, I might at once find out what men in my realms are unfit for their office, and also be able to distinguish the wise from the foolish. This stuff must be woven for me immediately." And he caused large sums of money to be given to both the weavers in order that they might begin their work directly. So the two pretended weavers set up two looms, and affected to work very busily, though in reality they did nothing at all. They asked for the most delicate silk and the purest gold thread, put both into their own knapsacks, and then continued their pretended work at the empty looms until late at night. "I should like to know how the weavers are getting on with my cloth," said the emperor to himself. After some little time had elapsed. He was, however, rather embarrassed when he remembered that a simpleton, or one unfit for his office, would be unable to see the manufacture. To be sure, he thought he had nothing to risk in his own person, but yet he would prefer sending somebody else to bring him intelligence about the weavers and their work before he troubled himself in the affair. All the people throughout the city had heard of the wonderful property the cloth was to possess, and all were anxious to learn how wise or how ignorant their neighbors might prove to be. "I will send my faithful old minister to the weavers," said the emperor at last, after some deliberation. "He will best be able to see how the cloth looks, for he is a man of sense, and no one can be more suitable for his office than he is." So the faithful old minister went into the hall, where the knaves were working with all their might at their empty looms. "What can be the meaning of this?" thought the old man, opening his eyes very wide. "I cannot discover the least bit of thread on the looms." However, he did not express his thoughts aloud. The impostors requested him very courteously to be so good as to come nearer their looms, and then asked him whether the design pleased him, and whether the colors were not very beautiful, at the same time pointing to the empty frames. The poor old minister looked and looked, but he could not discover anything on the looms, for a very good reason, viz., there was nothing there. "What?" thought he again. "Is it possible that I am a simpleton? I have never thought so myself, and no one must know it now if I am so. Can it be that I am unfit for my office? No, that must not be said either. I will never confess that I could not see the stuff." "Well, Sir Minister," said one of the knaves, still pretending to work, "you do not say whether the stuff pleases you." "Oh, it is excellent," replied the old minister, looking at the loom through his spectacles. "This pattern and the colors, yes, I will tell the emperor without delay. How very beautiful I think them." "We shall be much obliged to you," said the impostors. And then they named the different colors and described the pattern of the pretended stuff. The old minister listened attentively to their words, in order that he might repeat them to the emperor, and then the knaves asked for more silk and gold, saying that it was necessary to complete what they had begun. However, they put all that was given them into their knapsacks, and continued to work with as much apparent diligence as before as at their empty looms. The emperor now sent another officer of his court to see how the men were getting on, and to ascertain whether the cloth would soon be ready. It was just the same with this gentleman as with the minister. He surveyed the looms on all sides, but could see nothing at all but the empty frames. "Does not the stuff appear to be beautiful to you, as it did to my lord the minister?" asked the impostors of the emperor's second ambassador, at the same time making the same gestures as before, and talking of the design and colors which were not there. "I certainly am not stupid," thought the messenger. "It must be that I am not fit for my good, profitable office. That is very odd, however. No one shall know anything about it." And accordingly, he praised the stuff he could not see, and declared that he was delighted with both colors and patterns. "Indeed, please your imperial majesty," said he to his sovereign when he returned, "the cloth which the weavers are preparing is extraordinarily magnificent." The whole city was talking of the splendid cloth which the emperor had ordered to be woven at his own expense. And now the emperor himself wished to see the costly manufacture, while it was still in the loom. Accompanied by a select number of officers of the court, among whom were the two honest men who had already admired the cloth, he went to the crafty impostors, who, as soon as they were aware of the emperor's approach, went on working more diligently than ever, although they still did not pass a single thread through the looms. Is not the work absolutely magnificent?" said the two officers of the crown, already mentioned. "If your majesty will only be pleased to look at it. What a splendid design! What glorious colors!" And at the same time they pointed to the empty frames, for they imagined that everyone else could see this exquisite piece of workmanship. "How is this?" said the emperor to himself. "I can see nothing. This is indeed a terrible affair. Am I a simpleton, or am I unfit to be an emperor? That would be the worst thing that could happen. Oh, the cloth is charming," said he, aloud. "It has my complete approbation." And he smiled most graciously, and looked closely at the empty looms, for on no account would he say that he could not see what two of the officers of his court had praised so much. All his retinue now strained their eyes, hoping to discover something on the looms, but they could see no more than the others. Nevertheless, they all exclaimed, "Oh, how beautiful!" and advised his majesty to have some new clothes made from this splendid material for the approaching procession. "Magnificent! Charming! Excellent!" resounded on all sides, and everyone was uncommonly gay. The emperor shared in the general satisfaction, and presented the impostors with the riband of an order of knighthood to be worn on their buttonholes, and the title of gentlemen weavers. The rogues sat up the whole of the night before the day on which the procession was to take place, and had 16 lights burning, so that everyone might see how anxious they were to finish the emperor's new suit. They pretended to roll the cloth off the looms, cut the air with their scissors, and sewed with needles without any thread in them. "See," cried they at last, "the emperor's new clothes are ready." And now the emperor, with all the grandees of his court, came to the weavers, and the rogues raised their arms as if in the act of holding something up, saying, "Here are your majesty's trousers, here's the scarf, here's the mantle. The whole suit is as light as a cobweb. One might fancy one has nothing at all on when dressed in it. That, however, is the great future of this delicate cloth." "Yes, indeed," said all the courtiers, although not one of them could see anything of this exquisite manufacture. "If your imperial majesty will be graciously pleased to take off your clothes, we will fit on the new suit in front of the looking-glass." The emperor was accordingly undressed, and the rogues pretended to array him in this new suit, the emperor turning around from side to side before the looking-glass. "How splendid his majesty looks in his new clothes, and how well they fit!" everyone cried out. "What a design! What colors! These are indeed royal robes!" The canopy which is to be borne over your majesty in the procession is waiting, announced the chief master of the ceremonies. I am quite ready, answered the emperor. Do my new clothes fit well? Asked he, turning himself round again before the looking glass. Hey, wait a minute. What happened? Oh, bogus. Huh. Well, it was actually the first story in the book. But I've been gypped. I was just switching the pages, and oh, this is just wrong. It didn't finish the story. It immediately went so it goes from here into the next story. It doesn't finish the fairy tale. That is some bullshit. Let me see here. Let me check this next. Oh, this is messed up. I don't know if this book is... Well, no, it doesn't appear to be damaged. But this book doesn't actually finish any of the fairy tales. What the hell? Oh, man, that is... I mean, okay, some of them appear to be complete, but those ones that I was reading, the Emperor's New Clothes, was cut off. In fact, that is, oh man, that is just... There are some of these, like the excerpts from the Shoes of Fortune and the Snow Queen. Those stories appear to be complete. At least they're not cut off in mid-sentence, like, so what the hell was that? Yeah, okay, the other things here, no, okay, no, it's not, because some of these are still cut off. So yeah, this is a BS book. I got completely taken for a ride on that book. That's upsetting. That is so uncool, man. I am completely going to trash them in a review on iBooks, because it doesn't say excerpts from, it doesn't say samples from, it says, nope, these are just fairy tales. Sons of bitches! Stupid. Anyway. Wow, man. I feel like I basically led people on and then blueballed them and then just bailed. Myself included. I hadn't heard that story in a while, so I was looking forward to hearing the ending. That is just... That's not cool. So let me check Grimm's fairy tales and see if they're on this bullshit as well. Because I think this is a different publisher, so it better not be. Okay. This is a proper book. The stories here appear to be complete. They're also a lot shorter. I don't remember Grimm's fairy tales being this short. Huh. Interesting. But alrighty. So I guess we are no longer doing the incomplete Hans Christian Andersen fairy tales. I'm going to go ahead and switch to Grimm's fairy tales. Alright, so anyway, let me update the title. So I'm going to go ahead and switch back to this, and now we are reading Grimm's Fairy Tales by the Brothers Grimm. I guess I should just really put that as by the Brothers Grimm, which they're more known as. But anyway, let me hydrate again real quick. Actually, I'll be right back. I got to refill my water, and I'll be back in a minute. I have returned. Yes, yes. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And what up, Bez? So, glad you guys can hop on. Also, welcome to everybody else who's kind of joining and lurking in the background and just kind of chilling, get back and listening. So, appreciate you guys. Welcome to the Chill Zone. If you've never been here, my name is Chris Haru, and tonight we're going to be reading Fairy Tales by the Brothers Grimm. I had a little bit of technical difficulty, and then I got faked out by a crappy book. So, I checked this book. It's not going to leave us hanging like that other book did. So, at least the first several stories, it looks like they're all complete. So, we should be good to go. So again, feel free to kick back, relax, and we're just going to jump right in. Several of these, I don't remember. Actually, I don't really remember a lot of Grimm's fairy tales. Maybe some of the more popular ones, but several of these, maybe as we read them along, I might sound familiar, but if not, hey. So, give me a second, we'll get right started. The Golden Bird. A certain king had a beautiful garden. Wait, is my background music coming through okay? Yeah, alright. Sorry about that. The Golden Bird. A certain king had a beautiful garden, and in the garden stood a tree which bore golden apples. These apples were always counted, and about the time when they began to grow ripe, it was found that every night one of them was gone. The king became very angry at this, and ordered the gardener to keep watch all night under the tree. The gardener set his eldest son to watch, but about 12 o'clock he fell asleep, and in the morning another one of the apples was missing. Then the second son was ordered to watch, and at midnight he too fell asleep, and in the morning another apple was gone. Then the third son offered to keep watch, but the gardener at first would not let him, for fear some harm should come to him. However, at last he consented, and the young lad laid himself under the tree to watch. As the clock struck 12, he heard a rustling noise in the air, and a bird came flying that was of pure gold, and as it was snapping at one of the apples with its beak, the gardener's son jumped up and shot an arrow at it. But the arrow did the bird no harm, only it dropped a golden feather from its tail, and then flew away. The golden feather was brought to the king in the morning, and all the council was called together. Everyone agreed that it was worth more than all the wealth of the kingdom, but the king said, "One feather is of no use to me. I must have the whole bird." Then the gardener's eldest son set out and thought to find the golden bird very easily. And when he had gone but a little way, he came to a wood, and by the side of the wood he saw a fox sitting. So he took his bow and made ready to shoot at it. Then the fox said, "Do not shoot me, for I will give you good counsel. I know what your business is, and that you want to find the golden bird. You will reach a village in the evening, and when you get there, you will see two inns opposite to each other, one of which is very pleasant and beautiful to look at. Go not in there, but rest for the night in the other, though it may appear to you to be very poor and mean." But the son thought to himself, "Why can such a beast as this know about this matter?" So he shot his arrow at the fox, but he missed it, and it set up its tail above its back and ran into the wood. Then he went his way, and in the evening came to the village where the two inns were, and in one of these were people singing and dancing and feasting, but the other looked very dirty and poor. "I should be very silly," said he, if I went to that shabby house and left this charming place." So he went into the smart house, and ate and drank at his ease, and forgot the bird, and his country too. Time passed on, and as the eldest son did not come back, and no tidings were heard of him, the second son set out, and the same thing happened to him. He met the fox, who gave him the good advice, but when he came to the two inns, his eldest brother was standing at the window where the merrymaking was, and called to him to come in. And he could not withstand the temptation, but went in, and forgot the golden bird and his country in the same manner. Time passed on again, and the youngest son too wished to set out into the wide world to seek for the golden bird. But his father would not listen to it for a long while, for he was very fond of his son, and was afraid that some ill luck might happen to him also, and prevent his coming back. However, at last it was agreed he should go, for he would not rest at home, and as he came to the wood, he met the fox, and heard the same good counsel. But he was thankful to the fox, and did not attempt his life as his brothers had done. So the fox said, "Sit upon my tail, and you will travel faster." So he sat down, and the fox began to run, and away they went over stock and stone, so quick that their hair whistled in the wind. When they came to the village, the son followed the fox's counsel, and without looking about him went to the shabby inn and rested there all night at his ease. In the morning came the fox again, and met him as he was beginning his journey, and said, "Go straight forward till you come to a castle, before which lie a whole troop of soldiers fast asleep and snoring. Take no notice of them, but go into the castle and pass on and on until you come to a room, where the golden bird sits in a wooden cage. Close by it stands a beautiful golden cage, but do not try to take the bird out of the shabby cage and put it into the handsome one, otherwise you will repent it." Then the fox stretched out his tail again, and the young man sat himself down, and away they went over stock and stone, till their hair whistled in the wind. Before the gate, all was as the fox had said. So the son went in and found the chamber where the golden bird hung in a wooden cage, and below stood the golden cage, and the 3 golden apples that had been lost were lying close by it. Then thought he to himself, "It will be a very droll thing to bring away such a fine bird in this shabby cage." So he opened the door and took hold of it, and put it into the other cage. But the bird set up such a loud scream that all the soldiers awoke, and they took him prisoner and carried him before the king. The next morning the court sat to judge him, and when all was heard, it sentenced him to die, unless he should bring the king the golden horse, which could run as swiftly as the wind. And if he did this, he was to have the golden bird given him for his own. So he set out once more on his journey, sighing and in great despair, when on a sudden his friend the fox met him, and said, "You see now what has happened on account of you not listening to my counsel? I will still, however, tell you how to find the golden horse, if you will do as I bid you. You must go straight on until you come to the castle where the horse stands in his stall. By his side will lie the groom fast asleep and snoring. Take away the horse quietly, but be sure to put the old leathern saddle upon him, and not the golden one that is close by it." Then the son sat down on the fox's tail, and away they went over stock and stone, till their hair whistled in the wind. All went right, and the groom lay snoring with his hand upon the golden saddle. But when the son looked at the horse, he thought it a great pity to put the leathern saddle upon it. "I will give him the good one," said he. "I am sure he deserves it." As he took up the golden saddle, the groom awoke and cried out so loud that all the guards ran in and took him prisoner, and in the morning he was again brought before the court to be judged, and was sentenced to die. But it was agreed that, if he could bring thither the beautiful princess, he should live, and have the bird and the horse given him for his own. Then he went away his way very sorrowful, but the old fox came and said, "Why did you not listen to me? If you had, you would have carried away both the bird and the horse." Yet I will once more give you counsel. Go straight on, and in the evening you will arrive at a castle. At 12 o'clock at night, the princess goes to the bathing house. Go up to her and give her a kiss, and she will let you lead her away. But take care you do not suffer her to go and take leave of her father and mother." Then the fox stretched out his tail, and so away they went over stock and stone, till their hair whistled again. As they came to the castle, all was as the fox had said, and at 12 o'clock the young man met the princess going to the bath and gave her the kiss, and she agreed to run away with him, but begged with many tears that he would let her take leave of her father. At first he refused, but she wept still more and more, and fell at his feet, till at last he consented. But the moment she came to her father's house, the guards awoke, and he was taken prisoner again. Then he was brought before the king, and the king said, "You shall never have my daughter unless in 8 days you dig away the hill that stops the view from my window." Now, this hill was so big that the whole world could not take it away. And when he had worked for 7 days, and had done very little, the fox came and said, "Lie down and go to sleep. I will work for you." And in the morning he awoke, and the hill was gone. So he went merrily to the king, and told him that now that it was removed, he must give him the princess. Then the king was obliged to keep his word, and away went the young man and the princess. And the fox came and said to him, "We will have all three, the princess, the horse, and the bird." "Ah," said the young man, "that would be a great thing, but how can you contrive it?" "If you will only listen," said the fox, "it can be done. When you come to the king, and he asks for the beautiful princess, you must say, 'Here she is.' Then he will be very joyful, and you will mount the golden horse that they are to give you, and put out your hand to take leave of them, but shake hands with the princess last. Then lift her quickly onto the horse behind you, clap your spurs to his side, and gallop away as fast as you can." All went right. Then the fox said, "When you come to the castle where the bird is, I will stay with the princess at the door, and you will ride in and speak to the king. And when he sees that it is the right horse, he will bring out the bird, but you must sit still, and say that you want to look at it, to see whether it is the true golden bird. And when you get it into your hand, ride away." This too happened as the fox said. They carried off the bird, the princess mounted again, and they rode on to a great wood. Then the fox came and said, "Pray kill me, and cut off my head and my feet." But the young man refused to do it. So the fox said, "I will at any rate give you good counsel. Beware of 2 things. Ransom no one from the gallows, and sit down by the side of no river." Then away he went. Well, thought the young man, it is no hard matter to keep that advice. He rode on with the princess, till at last he came to the village where he had left his 2 brothers. And there he heard a great noise and uproar, and when he asked what was the matter, the people said, 2 men are going to be hanged." As he came nearer, he saw that the 2 men were his brothers, who had turned robbers. So he said, "Cannot in any way they be saved?" But the people said, "No, unless he should bestow all his money upon the rascals and buy their liberty." Then he did not stay to think about the matter, but paid what was asked, and his brothers were given up, and went on with him towards their home. And as they came to the wood where the fox first met them, it was so cool and pleasant that the 2 brothers said, "Let us sit down by the side of the river and rest a while to eat and drink." So he said, "Yes," and forgot the fox's counsel, and sat down on the side of the river. And while he suspected nothing, they came behind and threw him down the bank, and took the princess, the horse, and the bird, and went home to the king their master, and said, "All this we have won by our labor." Then there was great rejoicing made, but the horse would not eat, The bird would not sing, and the princess wept. The youngest son fell to the bottom of the river's bed. Luckily, it was nearly dry, but his bones were almost broken, and the bank was so steep that he could find no way to get out. Then the old fox came once more and scolded him for not following his advice. Otherwise, no evil would have befallen him. Yet, said he, I cannot leave you here, so lay hold of my tail and hold fast. Then he pulled him out of the river and said to him as he got upon the bank, Your brothers have set watch to kill you, if they find you in the kingdom. So he dressed himself as a poor man, and came secretly to the king's court, and was scarcely within the doors when the horse began to eat, and the bird to sing, and the princess left off weeping. Then he went to the king, and told him all his brothers' roguery, and they were seized and punished, and he had the princess given to him again, and after the king's death he was heir to his kingdom. A long while after, he went to walk one day in the wood, and the old fox met him, and besought him with tears in his eyes to kill him, and to cut off his head and feet. And at last he did so, and in a moment the fox was changed into a man, and turned out to be the brother of the princess, who had been lost a great many, many years. I mean, damn. I'm glad it kind of eventually worked out for him in the end, thanks to that fox, you know. But, hell. That was a thing. Yeah, I have never heard this one before, so that was actually pretty cool. So, on to the next one. Hans in luck. Some men were born to good luck. All they do or try to do comes right. All that falls to them is so much gain. All their geese are swans. All their cards are trumps. Toss them which way you will, they will always, like poor puss, alight upon their legs, and only move on so much the faster. The world may very likely not always think of them as they think of themselves, but what care they for the world? What can it know about the matter? One of these lucky beings was neighbor Hans. 7 long years he had worked hard for his master. At last he said, Master, my time is up. I must go home and see my poor mother once more. So pray pay me my wages and let me go. And the master said, You have been a faithful and good servant, Hans, so your pay shall be handsome. Then he gave him a lump of silver as big as his head. Hans took out his pocket handkerchief, put the piece of silver into it, threw it over his shoulder, and jogged off on his road homewards. As he went lazily on, dragging one foot after another, a man came in sight, trotting gaily along on a capital horse. Ah, said Hans aloud, what a fine thing it is to ride on horseback. There he sits as easy and happy as if he was at home in the chair by his fireside. He trips against no stones, saves shoe leather, and gets on he hardly knows how. Hans did not speak so softly, but the horseman heard it all, and said, Well, friend, why do you go on foot then? Ah, said he, I have this load to carry. To be sure it is silver, but it is so heavy that I can't hold up my head, and you must know how it hurts my shoulder sadly. What say you of making an exchange? Said the horseman. I will give you my horse, and you shall give me the silver, which will save you a great deal of trouble in carrying such a heavy load about with you. With all my heart, said Hans, but as you are so kind to me, I must tell you one thing. You will have a weary task to draw that silver about with you. However, the horseman got off, took the silver, helped Hans up, gave him the bridle onto one hand and the whip into the other, and said, When you want to go very fast, smack your lips loudly together, and cry, "Jip!" Hans was delighted as he sat on the horse, drew himself up, squared his elbows, turned out his toes, cracked his whip, and rode merrily off, 1 minute whistling a merry tune, and another singing, "No care and no sorrow, a fig for the morrow, we'll laugh and be merry, sing nay down dairy." I have no idea if that's the actual tune that I went to, but I just kind of rolled with that. After a time, he thought he should like to go a little faster, so he smacked his lips and cried, "Jip!" Away went the horse full gallop, and before Hans knew what he was about, he was thrown off and lay on his back by the roadside. His horse would have run off if a shepherd who was coming by driving a cow had not stopped it. Hans soon came to himself and got upon his legs again, sadly vexed, and said to the shepherd, "This riding is no joke. When a man has the luck to get upon a beast like that, stumbles and flings him off as if it would break his neck. However, I'm off now once for all. I like your cow now a great deal better than this smart beast that played me this trick, and has spoiled my best coat, you see, in this puddle, which, by the by, smells not very like a nosegay. One can walk along at one's leisure behind that cow, keep good company, and have milk, butter, and cheese every day into the bargain. What would I give to have such a prize?" "Well," said the shepherd, "if you are so fond of her, I will change my cow for your horse. I like to do good to my neighbors, even though I lose it by myself." "Done," said Hans merrily. What a noble heart that good man has," thought he. Then the shepherd jumped upon the horse, wished Hans and the cow good morning, and away he rode. Hans brushed his coat, wiped his face and hands, rested a while, and then drove off his cow quietly, and thought his bargain a very lucky one. If I have only a piece of bread, and I shall certainly always be able to get that, I can, whenever I like, eat my butter and cheese with it. And when I am thirsty, I can milk my cow and drink the milk. And what can I wish for more? When he came to an inn, he halted, ate up all his bread, and gave away his last penny for a glass of beer. When he had rested himself, he had set off again, driving his cow toward his mother's village. But the heat grew greater as soon as noon came on, till at last, as he found himself on a wide heath that would take him more than an hour to cross, he began to be so hot and parched that his tongue clave to the roof of his mouth. "I can find a cure for this," thought he. "Now I will milk my cow and quench my thirst." So he tied her to the stump of a tree and held his leathern cap to milk into, but not a drop was to be had. Who would have thought that this cow, which was to bring him milk and butter and cheese, was all that time utterly dry? Hans had not thought of looking to that. While he was trying his luck in milking, and managing the matter very clumsily, the uneasy beast began to think him very troublesome, and at last gave him such a kick on the head as knocked him down, and there he lay a long while senseless. Luckily, a butcher soon came by, driving a pig in a wheelbarrow. "What is the matter with you, my man?" said the butcher, as he helped him up. Hans told him what had happened, how he was dry, and wanted to milk his cow, but found the cow was dry too. Then the butcher gave him a flask of ale, saying, "There, drink and refresh yourself. Your cow will give you no milk. Don't you see she is an old beast, good for nothing but the slaughterhouse?" "Alas, alas," said Hans, "who would have thought it? What a shame to take my horse and give me only a dry cow. If I kill her, what will she be good for? I hate cow beef. It is not tender enough for me. If it were a pig now, like that fat gentleman you are driving along at his ease, one could do something with it. It would at any rate make sausages." "Well," said the butcher, "I don't like to say no when one is asked to do a kind neighborly thing. To please you, I will change, and give you my fine fat pig for the cow." "Heaven reward you for your kindness and self-denial," said Hans, as he gave the butcher the cow, and taking the pig off the wheelbarrow, drove it away, holding it by the string that was tied to its leg. So on he jogged, and all seemed now to go right with him. He had met with some misfortunes, to be sure, but he was now well repaid for all. How could it be otherwise with such a traveling companion as he had at last got? The next man he met was a countryman carrying a fine white goose. The countryman stopped to ask what was o'clock. This led to further chat, and Hans told him all his luck, how he had got so many good bargains, and how all the world went gay and smiling with him. The countryman then began to tell his tale, and said he was going to take the goose to a christening. "Feel," said he, "how heavy it is, and yet it is only 8 weeks old. Whoever roasts and eats it will find plenty of fat upon it, it has lived so well." "You're right," said Hans, as he weighed it in his hand, "but if you talk of fat, my pig is no trifle." Meanwhile, the countryman began to look grave, and shook his head. "Hark ye," said he, "my worthy friend, you seem a good sort of fellow, so I can't help doing you a kind turn. Your pig may get you into a scrape. In the village I just came from, the squire has had a pig stolen out of his sty. I was dreadfully afraid when I saw you that you had got the squire's pig. If you have and they catch you, it will be a bad job for you. The least they will do will be to throw you into the horse pond. Can you swim?" Poor Hans was sadly frightened. "Good man," cried he, "pray get me out of this scrape. I know nothing of where the pig was either bred or born, but he may have been the squire's for aught I can tell. You know this country better than I do. Take my pig and give me the goose." "I ought to have something into the bargain," said the countryman. "Give a fat goose for a pig, indeed. 'Tis not everyone who would do so much for you as that. However, I will not be hard upon you, as you are in trouble." Then he took the string in his hand, and drove off the pig by a side path, while Hans went on the way homewards free from care. After all, thought he, that chap is pretty well taken in. I don't care whose pig it is, but wherever he came from has been a very good friend to me. I have much the best of the bargain. First there will be a capital roast, then the fat will find me in goose grease for months. Then there will be all the beautiful white feathers. I will put them into my pillow, and then I am sure I shall sleep soundly without rocking. How happy my mother will be. Talk of a pig indeed, give me a fine fat goose." As he came to the next village, he saw a scissor grinder with his wheel, working and singing. "O'er hill and o'er dale, so happy I roam, work light and live well, all the world is my home. Then who is so blithe as merry as I?" Hans stood looking on for a while, and at last said, "You must be well off, Master Grinder. You seem to be happy at your work." "Yes," said the other, "mine is a golden trade. A good grinder never puts his hand into his pocket without finding money in it. But where did you get that beautiful goose?" "I did not buy it. I gave a pig for it." "And where did you get the pig?" "I gave a cow for it." "And the cow?" "I gave a horse for it." "And the horse?" "I gave a lump of silver as big as my head for it." "And the silver?" "Oh, I worked hard for that 7 long years." "You have thriven well into the world hitherto," said the grinder. "Now if you could find money in your pocket whenever you put your hand in it, your fortune would be made." "Very true, but how is that to be managed?" "How? Why, you must turn grinder like myself," said the other. "You only want a grindstone, the rest will come of itself. Here is one that is but little the worse for wear. I would not ask more than the value of your goose for it. Will you buy?" No, sorry. Hey, Ligament, how you doing? Sorry, I accidentally, flipped the pages over, so I'm going back to where I was. "Will you buy?" "How can you ask?" said Hans. "I should be the happiest man in the world if I could have money whenever I put my hand in my pocket." "What could I want more?" "There's the goose." "Now," said the grinder,
as he gave him a common rough stone that lay by his side. "This is a most capital stone. Do but work it well enough, and you can make an old nail cut with it." Thanks for the hydrate. Thanks for the hydrate. I appreciate that. I'm gonna go and do that right now, actually. Hans took the stone and went his way with a light heart. His eyes sparkled for joy, and he said to himself, "Surely I must have been born in a lucky hour. Everything I could want or wish for comes of itself. People are so kind. They seem to really think I do them a favor by letting them make me rich and giving me good bargains." Meanwhile, he began to be tired and hungry too, for he had given away his last penny in his joy at getting the cow. At last he could go no farther, for the stone tired him sadly, and he dragged himself to the side of a river that he might take a drink of water and rest a while. So he laid the stone carefully by his side on the bank, but as he stooped down to drink, he forgot it, pushed it a little, and down it rolled plump into the stream. For a while he watched it sinking in the deep clear water, then sprang up and danced for joy, and again fell upon his knees and thanked heaven, with tears in his eyes, for its kindness in taking away his only plague, the ugly heavy stone. "How happy am I!" cried he. "Nobody was ever so lucky as I." Then up he got with a light heart, free from all his troubles, and walked on till he reached his mother's house, and told her how very easy the road to good luck was. Well, that was kind of trippy. So yeah, we are reading fairy tales by the brothers Grimm. And so far, the couple that I've read, I haven't heard. I'm not as familiar with the Grimm fairy tales as I am with the Hans Christian Andersen fairy tales. Unfortunately, the book that I had of Andersen's tales was a jip. They actually cut off the stories at the end, so it was kind of like all this build up and then no payoff. It really sucked. So anyway. Jorinda and Jorindel. There was once an old castle that stood in the middle of a deep gloomy wood, and in the castle lived an old fairy. Now this fairy could take any shape she pleased. All the day long she flew about in the form of an owl, or crept about the country like a cat. But at night she always became an old woman again. When any young man came within 100 paces of her castle, he became quite fixed, and could not move a step until she came and set him free, which she would not do till he had given her his word never to come there again. But when any pretty maiden came within that space, she was changed into a bird, and the fairy put her into a cage, and hung her up in a chamber in the castle. There were 700 of these cages hanging in the castle, and all with beautiful birds in them. Now, there was one maiden whose name was Jorinda. She was prettier than all the pretty girls that had ever were seen before, and a shepherd lad whose name was Jorindel was very fond of her, and they were soon to be married. One day they went to walk in the wood, that they might be alone, and Jorindel said, "We must take care that we don't go too near to the fairy's castle." It was a beautiful evening. The last rays of the setting sun shone bright through the long stems of the trees upon the green underwood beneath, and the turtle doves sang from the tall birches. Jorinda sat down to gaze upon the sun. Jorindel sat by her side, and both felt sad, they knew not why, but it seemed as if they were to be parted from one another forever. They had wandered a long way, and when they looked to see which way they should go home, they found themselves at a loss to know what path to take. The sun was setting fast, and already half of its circle had sunk behind the hill. Jorindel on a sudden looked behind him, and saw through the bushes that they had, without knowing it, sat down close under the old walls of the castle. Then he shrank in fear, turned pale and trembled. Jorindel was just singing. The ring-dove sang from the willow spray, well a day, he mourned for the fate of his darling mate, well a day. When her song stopped suddenly, Jorindel turned to see the reason, and beheld his Jorinda changed into a nightingale, so that her song ended with a mournful jug-jug. An owl with fiery eyes flew 3 times round them, and 3 times screamed, "To-woo! To-woo! To-woo!" Jorindel could not move. He stood fixed as a stone, and could neither weep, nor speak, nor stir hand or foot. And now the sun went quite down, the gloomy night came, the owl flew into a bush, and a moment after the old fairy came forth, pale and meager, with staring eyes, and a nose and chin that almost met one another. She mumbled something to herself, seized the nightingale, and went away with it in her hand. Poor Jorindel saw the nightingale was gone, but what could he do? He could not speak, he could not move from the spot where he stood. At last the fairy came back and sang with a hoarse voice, "Till the prisoner is fast, and her doom is cast, there stay, oh stay. When the charm is around her, and the spell has bound her, hie away, away!" On a sudden, Jorindel found himself free. Then he fell on his knees before the fairy, and prayed her to give him back his dear Jorinda. But she laughed at him, and said he should never see her again. Then she went her way. He prayed, he wept, he sorrowed, but all in vain. "Alas," he said, "what will become of me?" He could not go back to his own home, so he went to a strange village, and employed himself in keeping sheep. Many a time did he walk around and round as near to the hated castle as he dared go, but all in vain. He heard or saw nothing of Jorinda. At last he dreamt one night that he found a beautiful purple flower, and that in the middle of it lay a costly pearl. And he dreamt that he plucked the flower and went with it in his hand to the castle, and that everything he touched with it was disenchanted, and that there he found his Jorinda again. In the morning when he awoke, he began to search over hill and dale for this pretty flower, and 8 long days he sought for it in vain. But on the 9th day, early in the morning, he found the beautiful purple flower, and in the middle of it was a large dewdrop as big as a costly pearl. Then he plucked the flower and set out and traveled day and night till he came again to the castle. He walked nearer than 100 paces to it, and yet he did not become as fixed as before, but found that he could go quite close up to the door. Jorindel was very glad indeed to see this. Then he touched the door with the flower, and it sprang open, so that he went in through the court, and listened when he heard so many birds singing. At last he came to the chamber where the fairy sat, with the 700 birds singing in the 700 cages. When she saw Jorindel, she was very angry and screamed with rage, but she could not come within 2 yards of him, for the flower he held in his hand was his safeguard. He looked around at the birds, but alas, there were many, many nightingales, and how then should he find out which was his Jorinda? While he was thinking what to do, he saw the fairy had taken down one of the cages and was making the best of her way off through the door. He ran or flew after her, touched the cage with the flower, and Jorinda stood before him, and threw her arms round his neck, looking as beautiful as ever, as beautiful as when they walked together in the wood. Then he touched all the other birds with the flower, so that they all took their old forms again. And he took Jorinda home where they were married, and lived happily together for many years. And so did a good many other lads, whose maidens had been forced to sing in the old fairies' cages by themselves much longer than they liked. Well, that was a thing. The Traveling Musicians. An honest farmer had once had an ass that had been a faithful servant to him a great many years, but was now growing old and every day more and more unfit for work. His master, therefore, was tired of keeping him and began to think of putting an end to him. But the ass, who saw that some mischief was in the wind, took himself slyly off, and began his journey towards the great city. For there, thought he, I may turn musician. Huh? After he had traveled a little way, he spied a dog lying by the roadside and panting as if he were tired. "What makes you pant so, my friend?" said the ass. "Alas," said the dog, "my master was going to knock me on the head because I am old and weak, and can no longer make myself useful to him in hunting. So I ran away, but what can I do to earn my livelihood?" "Hark ye," said the ass, "I am going to the great city to turn musician. Suppose you go with me and try what you can and do in the same way." The dog said he was willing, and they jogged on together. They had not gone far when they saw a cat sitting in the middle of the road and making a most rueful face. "Pray, my good lady," said the ass, "what's the matter with you? You look out of spirits." "Ah, me," said the cat. "How can one be in such good spirits when one's life is in danger?" "Because I am beginning to grow old, and had rather lie at my ease by the fire than run about the house after the mice. My mistress laid hold of me and was going to drown me, and though I have been lucky enough to get away from her, I do not know what I am to live upon." "Oh," said the ass, "by all means go with us to the great city. You are a good night singer, and may make your fortune as a musician." The cat was pleased with the thought, and joined the party. Soon afterward, as they were passing by a farmyard, they saw a cock perched upon a gate, and screaming out with all his might and main. "Bravo," said the ass. "Upon my word, you will make a famous noise. Pray, what is this all about?" "Why," said the cock, "I was just now saying that we should have fine weather for our washing day, and yet my mistress and the cook don't thank me for my pains, but threaten to cut off my head tomorrow, and make broth of me for the guests that are coming on Sunday." "Heaven forbid," said the ass. "Come with us, Master Chanticleer. It will be better, at any rate, than staying here to have your head cut off. Besides, who knows? If we care to sing in tune, we may get up some kind of concert. So come along with us." "With all my heart," said the cock. So they all four went on jollily together. They could not, however, reach the great city the first day. So when night came on, they went into a wood to sleep. The ass and the dog laid themselves under a great tree, and the cat climbed up into the branches, while the cock, thinking that the higher he sat, the safer he should be, flew up to the very top of the tree, and then, according to his custom, before he went to sleep, looked out on all sides of him to see that everything was well. In doing this, he saw afar off something bright and shining, and calling to his companions, said, "There must be a house no great way off, for I see a light." "If that be the case," said the ass, "we had better change our quarters, for our lodging is not the best in the world. Besides," added the dog, "I should not be the worse for a bone or two, or a bit of meat." So they walked off together towards the spot where Chanticleer had seen the light, and as they drew near it, it became larger and brighter, till at last they came close to a house in which a gang of robbers lived. Shush, Bez, shush. We all fought it. Ass meets cock, sees a dog and a cat. Hilarity ensues. Anyway. The ass, being the tallest of the company, marched up to the window and peeped in. "Well, donkey," said Chanticleer, "what do you see?" "What do I see?" replied the ass. "Why, I see a table spread with all kinds of good things, and robbers sitting about it making merry." "That would be a noble lodging for us," said the cock. "Yes," said the ass, "if we could only get in." So they consulted together on how they should contrive to get the robbers out, and at last they hit upon a plan. The ass placed himself upright on his hind legs, with his 4 feet resting against the window. The dog got upon his back, the cat scrambled up to the dog's shoulders, and the cock flew up and sat upon the cat's head. When all was ready, a signal was given, and they began their music. The ass brayed, the dog barked, the cat mewed, and the cock screamed. Then they all broke through the window at once, and came tumbling into the room, amongst the broken glass, with the most hideous clatter. The robbers, who had been not a little frightened by the opening concert, had now no doubt that some frightful hobgoblin had broken in upon them, and scampered away as fast as they could. The coast once clear, our travelers soon sat down and dispatched what the robbers had left, with as much eagerness as if they had not expected to eat again for a month. As soon as they had satisfied themselves, they put out the lights, and each once more sought out a resting place to his own liking. The donkey laid himself upon a heap of straw in the yard. The dog stretched himself upon a mat behind the door. The cat rolled herself up on the hearth before the warm ashes, and the cock perched upon a beam at the top of the house. And as they all were rather tired with their journey, they soon fell asleep. But about midnight, when the robbers saw from afar that the lights were out and that all seemed quiet, they began to think they had been in too great a hurry to run away, and one of them, who was bolder than the rest, went to see what was going on. Finding everything still, he marched into the kitchen and groped about till he found a match in order to light a candle, and then, espying the glittering, fiery eyes of the cat, he mistook them for live coals, and held the match to them to light it. But the cat, not understanding this joke, sprang at his face and spat and scratched at him. This frightened him dreadfully, and away he ran to the back door. But there the dog jumped up and bit him in the leg, and as he was crossing over the yard, the ass kicked him, and the cock, who had been awakened by the noise, crowed with all his might. At this the robber ran back as fast as he could to his comrades, and told the captain how a horrid witch had got into the house, and had spat at him and scratched his face with her long bony fingers. How a man with a knife in his hand had hidden himself behind the door and stabbed him in the leg. How a black monster stood in the yard and struck him with a club. And how the devil had sat upon the top of the house and cried out, "Throw the rascal up here!" After this, the robbers never dared to go back to the house, but the musicians were so pleased with their quarters that they took up their abode there. And there they are, dare I say, at this very day. I have never heard that story before. What the hell? Old Sultan. A shepherd had a faithful dog called Sultan, who was grown very old and had lost all his teeth. And one day when the shepherd and his wife were standing together before the house, the shepherd said, "I will shoot old Sultan tomorrow morning, for he is of no use now." But his wife said, "Pray let the poor faithful creature live. He has served us well a great many years, and we ought to give him a livelihood for the rest of his days." "But what can we do with him?" said the shepherd. He has not a tooth in his head, and the thieves don't care for him at all. To be sure, he has served us, but then he did it to earn his livelihood. Tomorrow shall be his last day, they depend upon it." Poor Sultan, who was lying close by them, heard all that the shepherd and his wife said to one another, and was very much frightened to think tomorrow would be his last day. So in the evening he went to his good friend the wolf, who lived in the wood, and told him all his sorrows, and how his master meant to kill him in the morning. "Make yourself easy," said the wolf. "I will give you some good advice. Your master, you know, goes out every morning very early with his wife into the field, and they take their little child with them and lay it down behind the hedge in the shade while they are at work. Now, do you lie down close by the child and pretend to be watching it, and I will come out of the wood and run away with it. You must run after me as fast as you can, and I will let it drop. Then you may carry it back, and they will think you have saved their child, and will be so thankful to you that they will take care of you as long as you live." The dog liked this plan very well, and accordingly so it was managed. The wolf ran with the child a little way, the shepherd and his wife screamed out, but Sultan soon overtook him and carried the poor little thing back to his master and mistress. Then the shepherd patted him on the head and said, "Old Sultan has saved our child from the wolf, and therefore he shall live and be well taken care of, and have plenty to eat. Wife, go home and give him a good dinner, and let him have my old cushion to sleep on as long as he lives." So from this time forward, Sultan had all that he could wish for. Soon afterwards, the wolf came up and wished him joy, and said, "Now, my good fellow, you must tell no tales, but turn your head the other way when I want to taste one of the old shepherd's fine fat sheep." "No," said the Sultan, "I will be true to my master." However, the wolf thought he was in joke, and came one night to get a dainty morsel. But Sultan had told his master what the wolf meant to do, so he had laid in wait for him behind the barn door. And when the wolf was busy looking out for a good fat sheep, he had a stout cudgel laid about his back, that combed his locks for him finely. Then the wolf was very angry, and called Sultan an old rogue, and swore he would have his revenge. So the next morning the wolf sent the boar to challenge Sultan to come into the wood and fight the matter. Now Sultan had nobody he could ask to be his second, but the shepherd's old three-legged cat. So he took her with him, and as the poor thing limped along with some trouble, she stuck up her tail straight in the air. The wolf and the wild boar were first on the ground, and when they espied their enemies coming, and saw the cat's long tail standing straight in the air, they thought she was carrying a sword for Sultan to fight with, and every time she limped, they thought she was picking up a stone to throw at them. So they said they should not like this way of fighting. Then the boar lay down behind a bush, and the wolf jumped up into a tree. Sultan and the cat soon came up, and looked about and wondered that no one was there. The boar, however, had not quite hidden himself, for his ears stuck out of the bush, and when he shook one of them a little, the cat, seeing something move, and thinking it was a mouse, sprang upon it, and bit and scratched it, so that the boar jumped up and grunted, and ran away, roaring out, "Look up in the tree, there sits the one who is to blame." So they looked up and espied the wolf sitting amongst the branches, and they called him a cowardly rascal, and would not suffer him to come down till he was heartily ashamed of himself, and had promised to be good friends again with old Sultan. The Straw, the Coal, and the Bean. In a village dwelt a poor old woman, who had gathered together a dish of beans and wanted to cook them. So she made a fire on her hearth, and that it might burn the quicker, she lighted it with a handful of straw. When she was emptying the beans into the pan, one dropped without her observing it, and lay on the ground beside a straw. And soon afterwards a burning coal from the fire leapt down to the two. Then the straw began and said, "Dear friends, from whence do you come here?" The coal replied, I fortunately sprang out of the fire, and if I had not escaped by sheer force, my death would have been certain. I should have been burnt to ashes." The bean said, "I too have escaped with a whole skin, but if the old woman had got me into the pan, I should have been made into broth without any mercy like my comrades." "And would a better fate have fallen to my lot?" said the straw. "The old woman has destroyed all my brethren in fire and smoke. She seized 60 of them at once and took their lives. I luckily slipped through her fingers." "But what are we to do now?" said the coal. "I think," answered the bean, "that as we have so fortunately escaped death, we should keep together like good companions, and lest a new mischance should overtake us here, we should go away together and repair to a foreign country." The proposition pleased the two others, and they set out on their way together. Soon, however, they came to a little brook, and as there was no bridge or footplank, they did not know how they were to get over it. The straw hit on a good idea and said, "I will lay myself straight across, and then you can walk over me as on a bridge." The straw therefore stretched itself from one bank to the other, and the coal, who was of an impetuous disposition, tripped quite boldly on to the newly built bridge. But when she had reached the middle, and heard the water was rushing beneath her, she was after all afraid, and stood still, and ventured no farther. The straw, however, began to burn, broke in 2 pieces, and fell into the stream. The coal slipped after her, hissed when she got into the water, and breathed her last. The bean, who had prudently stayed behind on the shore, could not but laugh at the event, was unable to stop, and laughed so heartily that she burst. It would have been all over with her likewise, if by good fortune a tailor who was traveling in search of work had not sat down to rest by the brook. As he had a compassionate heart, he pulled out his needle and thread and sewed her together. The bean thanked him most prettily, but as the tailor used black thread, all beans since then have had a black seam. Okay, so wait a minute. So a bean, a straw, and a coal escape their fates and decide to leave the country, to flee the country. Man, I want some of whatever the hell the Grimm brothers were smoking. Briar Rose. A king and queen once upon a time reigned in a country a great way off, where there were in those days fairies. Now this king and queen had plenty of money, and plenty of fine clothes to wear, and plenty of good things to eat and drink, and a coach to ride out in every day. But, though they had been married many years, they had no children, and this grieved them very much indeed. But one day, as the queen was walking by the side of the river, at the bottom of the garden, she saw a poor little fish that had thrown itself out of the water, and lay gasping and nearly dead on the bank. Then the queen took pity on the little fish, and threw it back again into the river. And before it swam away, it lifted its head out of the water and said, "I know what your wish is, and it shall be fulfilled. In return for your kindness to me, you will soon have a daughter." What the little fish had foretold soon came to pass, and the queen had a little girl, so very beautiful that the king could not cease looking on for joy, and said he would hold a great feast and make merry, and show the child to all the land. So he asked his kinsmen and nobles, and friends and neighbors. But the queen said, "I will have the fairies also, that they might be kind and good to our little daughter." Now, there were 13 fairies in the kingdom, but as the king and queen had only 12 golden dishes for them to eat out of, they were forced to leave one of the fairies without asking her. So 12 fairies came, each with a high red cap on her head, and red shoes with high heels on her feet, and a long white wand in her hand. And after the feast was over, they gathered round in a ring and gave all their best gifts to the little princess. One gave her goodness, another beauty, another riches, and so on until she had all that was good in the world. Just as 11 of them had done blessing her, a great noise was heard in the courtyard, and word was brought that the 13th fairy was come, with a black cap on her head, and black shoes on her feet, and a broomstick in her hand. And presently up she came into the dining hall. Now, as she had not been asked to the feast, she was very angry, and scolded the king and queen very much, and set to work to take her revenge. So she cried out, "The king's daughter shall, in her 15th year, be wounded by a spindle, and fall down dead." Then the 12th of the friendly fairies, who had not yet given her gift, came forward and said that the evil wish must be fulfilled, but that she could soften its mischief. So her gift was that the king's daughter, when the spindle wounded her, should not really die, but should only fall asleep for 100 years. However, the king hoped still to save his dear child altogether from the threatened evil. So he ordered that all the spindles in the kingdom should be bought up and burnt. But all of the gifts of the first 11 fairies were in the meantime fulfilled, for the princess was so beautiful and well behaved and good and wise that everyone who knew her loved her. It happened that, on the very day she was 15 years old, the king and queen were not at home, and she was left alone in the palace. So she roved about by herself, and looked at all the rooms and chambers, till at last she came to an old tower, to which there was a narrow staircase ending with a little door. In the door there was a golden key, and when she turned it, the door sprang open, and there sat an old lady spinning away very busily. "Why, how now, good mother?" said the princess. "What are you doing there?" "Spinning," said the old lady, and nodded her head, humming a tune, while buzz went the wheel. "How prettily that little thing turns around," said the princess, and took the spindle and began to try and spin. But scarcely had she touched it, before the fairy's prophecy was fulfilled. The spindle wounded her, and she fell down lifeless on the ground. However, she was not dead, but had only fallen into a deep sleep. And the king and queen, who had just come home, and all their court, fell asleep too. And the horses slept in the stables, and the dogs in the court, the pigeons on the housetop, and the very flies slept upon the walls. Even the fire on the hearth left off blazing, and went to sleep. The jack stopped, and the spit that was turning about with a goose upon it for the king's dinner stood still. And the cook, who was at that moment pulling the kitchen boy by the hair to give him a box on the ear for something he had done amiss, let him go, and both fell asleep. The butler, who was slyly tasting the ale, fell asleep with the jug at his lips, and thus everything stood still and slept soundly. A large hedge of thorns soon grew round the palace, and every year it became higher and thicker, till at last the old palace was surrounded and hidden, so that not even the roof or the chimneys could be seen. But there went a report through all the land of the beautiful sleeping Briar Rose, for so the king's daughter was called, so that, from time to time, several kings' sons came and tried to break through the thicket into the palace. This, however, none of them could ever do, for the thorns and bushes laid hold of them, as if it were hands, and there they were stuck fast and died wretchedly. After many, many years, there came a king's son into that land, and an old man told him the story of the thicket of thorns, and how a beautiful palace stood behind it, and how a wonderful princess called Briar Rose lay in it asleep with all her court. He told, too, how he had heard from his grandfather that many, many princesses come, and had tried to break through the thicket, but that they had all stuck fast in it and died. Then the young prince said, All this shall not frighten me. I will go and see this briar rose." The old man tried to hinder him, but he was bent upon going. Now that very day the 100 years were ended, and as the prince came to the thicket, he saw nothing but beautiful flowering shrubs, through which he went with ease, and they shut in after him as thick as ever. Then he at last came to the palace, and there in the court lay the dogs asleep, and the horses were standing in the stables, and on the roof sat the pigeons fast asleep, with their heads under their wings. And when he came into the palace, the flies were sleeping on the walls, the spit was standing still, the butler had the jug of ale at his lips, going to take a draught, the maid sat with a fowl in her lap ready to be plucked, and the cook in the kitchen was still holding up her hand as if she were going to beat the boy. Then he went on still farther, and all was so still that he could hear every breath he drew, till at last he came to the old tower, and opened the door of the little room in which Briar Rose was, and there she lay fast asleep on a couch by the window. She looked so beautiful that he could not take her eyes off of her, so he stooped down and gave her a kiss. But the moment he kissed her, she opened her eyes and awoke, and smiled upon him, and they went out together. And soon the king and queen also awoke, and all the court, and gazed on at each other with great wonder. And the horses shook themselves, and the dogs jumped up and barked. The pigeons took their heads from under their wings, and looked about and flew into the fields. The flies on the walls buzzed again. The fire in the kitchen blazed up. Round went the jack, and round went the spit, with the goose for the king's dinner upon it. The butler finished his draught of ale, the maid went on plucking the fowl, and the cook gave the boy the box on his ear. And then the prince and Briar Rose were married, and the wedding feast was given, and they lived happily together all their lives long. Okay. I'd actually forgotten that that story was called Briar Rose, so that was pretty cool. I am going to read one more, and then I'm going to wind up signing off for the night. I know it's it's relatively speaking a short stream, like under 2 hours, but I also actually wound up kind of starting late because of all the technical difficulties, so unfortunately, I do actually have to kind of get up in the morning, so I can't really stay up all night. Unfortunately, so. The Dog and the Sparrow. A shepherd's dog had a master who took no care of him, but often let him suffer the greatest hunger. At last he could bear it no longer, so he took to his heels and ran off, and off he ran in a very sad and sorrowful mood. On the road he met a sparrow that said to him, "Why are you so sad, my friend?" "Because," said the dog, "I am still very, very hungry and have nothing to eat." "If that be all," answered the sparrow, "come with me into the next town, and I will soon find you plenty of food." So on they went together into the town, and as they passed by a butcher's shop, the sparrow said to the dog, "Stand there a little while I peck you down a piece of meat." So the sparrow perched upon the shelf, and having first looked carefully about her to see if anyone was watching her, she pecked and scratched at a steak that lay upon the edge of the shelf, till at last down it fell. Then the dog snapped it up, and scrambled away with it into a corner, where he soon ate it all up. "Well," said the sparrow, "you shall have some more if you will, so come with me to the next shop, and I will peck you down another steak." When the dog had eaten this too, the sparrow said to him, "Well, my good friend, have you had enough now?" "I have had plenty to eat," answered he, "but I should like to have a piece of bread to eat after all." "Come with me then," said the sparrow, "and you shall soon have that too." So she took him to a baker's shop, and pecked at 2 rolls that lay in the window till they fell down. And as the dog still wished for more, she took him to another shop and pecked down some more for him. When that was eaten, the sparrow asked him whether he had had enough now. "Yes," said he, "and now let us take a walk a little way out of the town." So they both went out upon the high road, but as the weather was warm, they had not gone far before the dog said, "I am very much tired. I should like to take a nap." "Very well," answered the sparrow. "Do so, and in the meantime I will perch upon that bush." So the dog stretched himself out on the road, and fell fast asleep. Whilst he slept, there came by a carter with the cart drawn by 3 horses, and loaded with 2 casks of wine. The sparrow, seeing that the carter did not turn out of the way, but would go on in the track in which the dog lay, so as to drive over him, called out, "Stop, stop, Mr. Carter, or it shall be the worse for you." But the carter, grumbling to himself, "You make it the worse for me indeed. What can you do?" cracked his whip, and drove his cart over the poor dog, so that the wheels crushed him to death. "There," cried the sparrow, "thou cruel villain, thou hast killed my friend the dog. Now mind what I say. This deed of thine shall cost thee all thou art worth." "Do your worst and welcome," said the brute. "What harm can you do to me?" and passed on. But the sparrow crept under the tilt of the cart, and pecked at the bung of one of the casks till she loosened it, and then all the wine ran out, without the carter seeing it. At last he looked round, and saw that the cart was dripping, and the cask quite empty. "What an unlucky wretch am I!" cried he. Not wretch enough yet," said the sparrow, as she lighted upon the head of one of the horses, and pecked at him till he reared up and kicked. When the carter saw this, he drew out his hatchet and aimed a blow at the sparrow, meaning to kill her, but she flew away, and the blow fell upon the poor horse's head with such force that he fell down dead. "Unlucky wretch that I am!" cried he. "Not wretch enough yet," said the sparrow. And as the carter went on with the other 2 horses, she again crept under the tilt of the cart, and pecked out the bung of the second cask, so that all the wine ran out. When the carter saw this, he again cried out, "Miserable wretch that I am!" But the sparrow answered, "Not wretch enough yet," and perched on the head of the second horse, and pecked at him too. The carter ran up and struck at her again with his hatchet, but away she flew, and the blow fell upon the second horse and killed him on the spot. "Unlucky wretch that I am," said he. "Not wretch enough yet," said the sparrow, and perching upon the third horse, she began to peck him too. The carter was mad with fury, and without looking about him or caring what he was about, struck again at the sparrow, but killed his third horse as he had done the other 2. "Alas! Miserable wretch that I am!" cried he. "Not wretch enough yet," answered the sparrow as she flew away. "Now I will plague and punish thee at thy own house." The carter was forced at last to leave his cart behind him, and to go home overflowing with rage and vexation. "Alas," he said to his wife, "what ill luck has befallen me! My wine is all spilt, my horses are all 3 dead." "Alas, husband," replied she, "and a wicked bird has come into the house, and has brought with her all the birds in the world, I am sure, and they have fallen upon our corn in the loft, and are eating it up at such a rate." Away ran the husband upstairs, and saw thousands of birds sitting upon the floor, eating up his corn, with the sparrow in the midst of them. "Unlucky wretch that I am!" cried the carter, for he saw that the corn was almost all gone. "Not wretch enough yet," said the sparrow. "Thy cruelty shall cost thee thy life yet." And away she flew. The carter, seeing that he had thus lost all that he had, went down into his kitchen, and still was not sorry for what he had done, but sat himself angrily and sulkily in the chimney corner. But the sparrow sat on the outside of the window and cried, "Carter, thy cruelty shall cost thee thy life." With that, he jumped up in a rage, seized his hatchet, and threw it at the sparrow, but it missed her and only broke the window. The sparrow now hopped in, perched upon the window seat, and cried, "Carter, it shall cost thee thy life." Then he became mad and blind with rage, and struck the window seat with such force that he cleft it in two. And as the sparrow flew from place to place, The carter and his wife were so furious that they broke all their furniture, glasses, chairs, benches, the table, and at last the walls, without touching the bird at all. In the end, however, they caught her, and the wife said, "Shall I kill her at once?" "No," cried he, "that is letting her off too easily. She shall die a much more cruel death. I will eat her." But the sparrow began to flutter about, and stretch out her neck and cried, "Carter, it shall cost thee thy life yet." With that he could wait no longer. So he gave his wife the hatchet, and cried, "Wife, strike at the bird and kill her in my hand." And the wife struck, but she missed her aim, and hit her husband on the head so that he fell down dead. And the sparrow flew quietly home to her nest. Moral of the story: don't piss off sparrows. Holy shit, man. I'm beginning to think that this is where Grimdark comes from. So, that was a night of fairy tales by the Brothers Grimm. Let's see. Ooh, okay, so I actually know some of these later on. So let's see here. We read The Golden Bird, Hans in Luck, Jorinda and Jorindel, The Traveling Musicians, Old Sultan, The Straw, the Coal and the Bean, Briar Rose, and The Dog and the Sparrow. I might have to go ahead and pick this up again, like, next week. And then hopefully I'll have those technical issues resolved so that we're not going to have the same problem as today. So what did you guys think? Did you enjoy the fairy tales? I hope you had a good time and enjoyed the stories for tonight. Like I said, we started 2 hours late, unfortunately, so I am at about my limit. Plus, my voice is actually kind of cracking and everything, so I am probably going to go ahead and call it a night here. Next week, we'll actually go ahead and, like I said, hopefully I won't have the same technical issues that I had today. And the stream will start at 9:30 as it's supposed to and stuff. We won't start so late, and we'll kind of keep going till about this time. So I don't know, what do you guys think? Would you be interested? Would you like to hear more fairy tales next week as well? We can go ahead and continue the book. Well, thanks for the hydrate. That's actually good timing. Very good timing, because I could definitely use a hydrate from the sounds of it, right? But yeah, my voice is definitely starting to get a little bit of more of that fry going. So, like I said, I'm going to go ahead and call it here for the night. Sorry for this being a relatively short stream because of all the technical issues and stuff that we had. So I will do a longer one next week. Let's see, is there anybody around that I could raid? Let me see here. You know what? Let's see, I don't really know anybody offhand to raid into, so I'm looking and I'm not really kind of seeing anybody doing anything kind of similar, at least not in my current follow list. Having a bit of a hard time kind of checking that out though. It's lagging a little bit. So, you know what? I am going to go ahead and just simply raid in, and we'll keep up, like, you know, the kind of the chill vibe and everything. I'm going to raid into Ferret Software, which, if you're not familiar, Pirate Software, actually, Thor has a ferret rescue. And so he funds it by actually streaming the ferrets. They have their own channel, and so he funds it all from the ads on that channel, and it's all like original music and stuff there. So it's a nice chill little thing. I think at this time of night, Thor's probably well, no, he's not streaming tonight because he had some things going on and stuff. But yeah, I'm just gonna go ahead and raid into that kind of quietly and just kind of go on from there. But thanks so much for everybody who kind of came in and hung out, and you know, thanks for staying on in the chat. Ligaments, you have a good night and everything. Lumi, Bez, thanks for you guys for hanging out and chat and stuff. Everybody else who's kind of chilling and vibing in the background and everything. We're completely lurk friendly here, so you know, by all means, come in, kick back, and just enjoy the vibe, relax, and chill. Again, thanks for joining me in the chill zone, even though, you know, for all the technical issues and stuff. And I will talk to you guys again next week. So, I try to do these reading streams every Thursday, so by all means, feel free to come back on Thursday and we'll kind of continue more fairy tales or something else. Again, thanks so much for hanging out with me tonight, guys. You guys have a great night, have a great day. Whatever time zone you're in. And have a good night.